Welcome back. My cinematographer is very pregnant, so I am going to do the vlog, run and gun, trusting my camera's autofocus and taking you on an amazing journey, an amazingly realistic, incredible, off-the-cuff journey to go look at some dirt. Yeah, I don't want to do any edits. Just gonna walk with the camera pointed at my face. I'm actually carrying this huge monopod thing that Rachel would use occasionally. It's kind of heavy. It's not really made to be held out at arm's length and used for a selfie stick, but yeah, I guess it's kind of stable. And you know, I can hold on to it. I have kind of a big camera, and it's not the sort of camera that's really super easy to support on something. And I'm talking through the camera's internal microphone, and normally I have a shotgun on it. But that's way too much technical information for a gardening channel, isn't it? I'm kind of a nerd. Man, sorry I let that out. So what I am doing today is I am taking you over to see the animal food plot slash fixing the soil area thing that I planted a little while ago, and we're gonna look at it in the beautiful fading light of an Alabama late fall. I think it's late fall, isn't it? Take a look at this. This right here is my food plot slash really kind of like chicken grain growing area slash soil improvement program. As you can see here, we have some grains and we have some brassicas. One thing that we're missing is a legume. Generally, I like to plant a legume, a grain, and a brassica together for a fall or a winter soil improvement plot. But we've got what we've got. You look at my pond here. Isn't this just beautiful? I actually love it at this time of year. Leaves are falling. Man, isn't that beautiful? This pond actually drips water out of it continuously because there is a spring. If you can see back in that corner there where there's a bunch of shrubs, let's say right in the middle there's a bunch of shrubs and junk. That's surrounding a spring, and that continually feeds this pond. And then it overflows down here from this pipe. See, and it just runs and runs and runs. And it just kind of seeps down here. I actually killed a water moccasin right here. So yes, there's trouble in paradise. You see the water just kind of goes back into there. And it's not really the kind of easy setup where I could get water into the gardens, because, you know what, let's just turn this around again and we'll walk right to the gardens. So you can see, there's the pond up there. That's a target right there. If we just continue this direction here, and I walk as nicely as I can, so try not to get you guys getting motion sickness. We just keep going and going and going and going and going. And it dips down for a while. Like, we could run the water a ways if we ran pipes, but about here it starts to go up again. And then an additional 40 feet or so, and we are coming into the grocery row gardens. So there is a way. We could probably ram pump water up here pretty easily, and then put some sort of a tank up here and run the water down to irrigate these. But I don't own the property. So doing infrastructure projects like that are not really at the top of my priority list. So instead I mulch and I watch out for, you know, when it rains. And then if it doesn't rain on it for a couple of weeks, I go back and I grab some water and fill up the cart, and then take that water in the 5-gallon buckets and take some watering cans and fertigate my way through. So I'm taking you right now to go see another area that I am improving. We've got some areas here. This section where the old Jeep is and everything, that's the end of the row gardens right there. And then all this is grass. And we had some sheep out here, but one of the sheep died. And we gave the other one back to the folks that we had got the sheep from. I said, well, all right, we failed fast. But through here you could see we are running the Orpingtons. We have a set of Orpingtons in here, and they are chopping bit by bit, going through the ground here, manuring it, chewing it down, and laying some nice eggs for us. This skirting system has worked really well to protect them. The predators have not figured out how to get in here, and we know that there are some nasty things out here. Foxes, coyotes, raccoons, possums, and those big, delicious, tasty chickens in there are still doing fine. So I'm very pleased with that. I was a little concerned about something digging its way under there and making a mess. So back to improving the soil. The beds, basically deer food plots. I realized when I was putting some cover crops in, I got some winter rye and I started planting it in. A friend of mine said, oh yeah, we plant a lot of plots like that. And I said, you do? And he said, oh yeah, we plant it for the deer. What turns out in Alabama, I grew up in Florida, particularly in South Florida, so I didn't know this. But it turns out in Alabama, the main pastime after college football is deer. You can go into the grocery store here and they are selling deer corn. Like they've got deer blinds for sale. It's wild. It is a major sport here. And not really just a sport, but a lot of people live off the meat supply they get from hunting. So over here, I planted what you might consider a deer food plot, and it is not the most beautiful plot in the world. This is some of the absolutely worst soil that we have on this entire piece of property. If you look down here at this area, do you see that? Does that look healthy at all? That's like, look at it, it's gravel and sand. This is like construction debris level of bad soil. So what I'm doing here is taking portions of it and trying to get some organic matter on it. It is an endless task if you are going to try and put lots of fertilizer or compost around, particularly if you're going to grow any kind of large scale plot. It's not great. So when you have this kind of level of drainage and poor soil, one of the things that we know that this soil is lacking is organic matter. So if you can't get a ton of compost, if you don't have a source like for a massive amount of wood chips or the time to wait on it, you know, you can do like the deer plot people do. And what the deer plot people do is they take triple 13 or even triple 17 and they mix it with the combination of seeds that they want to plant out for the deer, and they broadcast it. So you got one of those little fertilizer spreaders, you can do that. Or if you got a buggy to pull behind your truck that'll throw it further, you could do that. There are spreaders that spread, they just throw it out there, right? You got your fertilizer and your seed together. So you get this great big plot of green, and it might have turnips in it, mustard in it, it could have vetch or peas. It's a combination, and it always has some grain, and it's usually here it's oats. Oats are the most common. There's a beautiful plot of oats down the road that a neighbor planted to bring in the deer, and it's beautiful and it's green at a time when most everything else is brown. So you don't have ideal situations. You have really low organic matter. So what do? You mix some fertilizer and some seed and you throw it out there, and you get a green patch of life. Is that an ideal way to fix the soil? No. It's not like perfect world way to fix the soil. But there is some use to it. This area right here is all turnips with a few buckwheat in there, but it's mostly turnips now. That looks pretty good, especially considering, you know, what it came out of. So look at this here. I mean, wow, terrible stuff. And then you come over here and you go, look at that. There's some life in that. That's a little better. It's not great. It's not the best thing in the entire world. I mean, it doesn't have all the nutrients and stuff that you'd want. But if I were to just take the nutrients, say I decided to get all the micronutrient mixes and everything, and I just spread them across this horrible dirt. I put enough lime to balance the pH a little bit and give it some calcium. Maybe I have some gypsum in there to loosen any clay that might be underneath. Maybe I've got some copper sulfate in a tiny amount to add sulfur and copper and sodium molybdate. And I got all these bits and pieces, right? And I dump my phosphorus and my potassium and my nitrogen, and I put it all out here, and then we get 12 inches of rain, which is not uncommon in a weekend. Boom, you get this huge deluge of rain. After, you know, a few weeks of it being dry, what happens? The stuff just washes around, washes away. And even if you don't get that much rain, having some soil life or soil biology, some organic matter in the ground, makes it possible for the plants to grab what they need, right? That's the exchange capacity of the soil is changed. This soil, if we can be so generous as to call it soil, has a poor exchange capacity. The chemical actions of the roots in this soil, as best as I understand it from my non-scientific perspective, don't work particularly well. And that's where organic matter comes in. So if you want to triage, you want to get some life in the ground, you got a big area that you want to fix, you might think about using the deer plot method as a stepping stone to something better. It's not the end all. This isn't the way you want to grow all your food. I mean, when you have soil that can barely grow grass, and you turn around and you stick triple 13 or 10-10-10 on it, is that great for you? Not really. I mean, there may be a benefit in that you didn't have any, you know, there's no pesticides on it, right? Maybe you didn't round up the area. So it could be worse. It could be much worse. But triple 13 is not particularly nourishing for man or beast. But the benefit of doing this, hey, I'm just going to cover this big area, is you can fix the organic matter part of it. You can add that extra soil life. You can get some green on the ground with a kind of a stopgap measure, right? So you cut yourself. You're whittling. Let's say you're whittling. What would you be whittling, guys? let's say you're whittling a 1 serving tankard. A 1 serving tankard that you can drink kombucha out of. And you're whittling it with your pocket knife. And you know, it's a good 12-ounce tankard, right? And you're cutting away at the inside of it and everything's going really well. And then you slip and you slice your finger. Well, the first thing you do is you stop the bleeding. My nutrients are going away. Okay, it's a stretch, but you stop the bleeding first. You know, you get the you get a Band-Aid on it. When you have this, you know, terrible ground with very little organic matter, poor exchange, not a lot of life in it, maybe throwing out a food plot and getting some life on the ground means now you have a sponge, you've got organic matter, you've got some bacteria and fungi, you've got all those root exudates that are bringing in soil life. And now you've got something to start with. And that's what I did in a lot of my plots. Multiple people have said, man, that soil looks better than when you started. It's darker. Yeah. I threw a lot of rye and peas and stuff out this last year and then tilled it under. And I've actually done that more than once. I tilled under clover and I tilled under rye. And I tilled under weeds and I tilled under some various cover crops in between. I had black-eyed peas that I stuck out there and tilled under. And so what's happening is that life is starting to come in. Look over here, this is around my grape trellises. This area right here, I wanted to improve the soil. It's pretty bad. So I did the deer plot thing. Look at all that life. Look, there's even macro life in there. That's way better. It's way better than what the ground looks like around it. There's a lot going on in there. And it's pretty. And the cat likes it. What are you doing? It's definitely a vlog now because a cat has beard. Hey kitty, looking. Hey cat, welcome to my vlog. Yeah, there you go. This is what you get when you run and gun. So the cat loves it. But if you look at this, that's where I didn't plant. That's where I did plant. There's more life on there. So I call this this is your triage. You don't have all of the organic matter to throw around. Maybe you don't have all that mulch. You don't have much that you can trust. You don't have a fortune to spend on some sort of perfect, amazing organic amendment. And you got a bunch of bad soil. So what do? Throw it on a cover crop. And if you can get it, sure, spread some manure out or use compost tea or something like that to get it growing well. But I wouldn't feel too guilty about getting a bag of triple 13 and throwing it out there like those deer plot people do. Right here, this whole area, that's going to get turned into biochar. We cleared lots of trees and brush out of this area. It's going to be pasture again. This is pretty poisoned ground. I don't know how permanent the poison is. It was sprayed. This was all Kogan grass in here. These are the remnants. There are some spots where it's starting to come back again, which is not good. It's one of the worst invasive plants in the world. And so my landlord said he's got to get it out of here. So this whole area got sprayed. He doesn't want the patch to spread and take over the property and become a monoculture of Kogan grass. So all this ground here, I wouldn't want to necessarily put my gardens on it right away. I don't know how long that stuff sticks around. I don't trust it very much. I don't like it. But I think I can have nature start to heal itself. If I put a cover crop in here with a lot of different varieties and different life and let it grow, till it under, get some organic matter, let those fungi and bacteria and everything work on it for a while, get it really active and green, and till it under, let it rot, let the decomposition organisms work on it, bind up the toxins, change the exchange capacity, fill the soil with carbon, and then mix the biochar in at the same time, this whole area right here could become a nice piece of pasture that we can run chickens through, or goats, or pigs, or even a little tiny cow or something like that on occasion. And the important thing, I think, is to get the life on the ground to begin with. I could just let it all go to weeds, or I mean, the Kogan grass would be likely to come back if we just left it alone and we didn't cover it with anything. But there's a huge amount of life that you can bring in just by way over sowing with plants that you know will add carbon. Lots and lots of compost in the soil, like rye, that massive root system, right? There aren't a lot of weeds that can do what rye does. There are some, but you probably don't want them. The rye puts this massive network of roots in the ground, which then breaks down into compost when you till it under. Oats put quite a bit in the ground, and wheat puts quite a bit in the ground. Those are nice carbon holding, humus building crops that start to improve the tilth of your soil, the receptivity to water, the exchange ability for roots to pull up what they need. And then at the same time, you throw in some brassicas. Brassicas have some compounds in them that are known to repel some pests. And also, I think having a polyculture is always a good idea. So the more things you can kind of mix in, the better. And then what you do is you throw your legume in, and your legume is, you know, a bean or a pea or hairy vetch, something like that. Lentils, you know, lentils actually make a pretty good garden cover crop over a mild winter. So if we throw those over this whole area, imagine this space just totally greened up like those other patches. All the life that could be in here, instead of this basically barren death desert that we have right now. That gets in here, starts adding the nitrogen, those nitrogen fixers, starts adding all that humus, starts pumping in all those sugars into the ground and bringing in the soil life. I mean, it's a triage. You know, sure, you could get your biochar, you could make a bunch of compost, and you could start building beds out here, but how long are you going to be doing that? I gotta improve a bunch of areas quickly, because hopefully we'll be farming a lot of these spots when the spring comes. And if I just leave the ground the way it is out here, that's pretty miserable stuff. I want to get that life in the ground, and then I can switch over to doing my regular micronutrient mixes and compost and chop and drop and everything else. But I am not adverse to putting those band-aids on the ground. I don't know if any of you guys have tried it. I don't like the way vegetables taste when I feed them with triple 13 or 10-10-10. We did some experiments on that, and we noticed that everything tastes way, way better when you've got some organic matter in the ground, and when you have a good mix of micronutrients, particularly adding things like kelp meal and sodium molybdate and those tiny things that make the huge difference in flavor. But if I'm going to get a bunch of compost in the ground, and I'm going to get a bunch of organic matter going, and I can do that with a 14-pound bag of fertilizer and about $10 worth of seeds, and I can cover a quarter acre, a half an acre, works pretty well. And it's definitely been darkening up the soil in the areas that we were using this and tilling it under. So let me know what you think. I'm curious. You know, I might get some pushback for not being a purist on everything organic. But right now, I'll tell you, my primary focus is getting food in the ground and getting the most nutrient density out of some really, really, really poor soil. And so I'm looking at it as, how can we get the ground working for us and producing lots of food in the ground and building up the soil to the point where the soil is actually soil instead of just construction junk, throwaway misery. So, well, I guess leave me a like if you enjoy, thumbs up, and the dislike button doesn't work anymore for some reason. So, what are you gonna do? Thanks for joining me. Catch y'all next time. And until then, may your thumbs always be green.
I buried my rabbit beneath the cherry tree one fine afternoon. I know that we'll meet again on a fruit salad spoon.